Have you ever wondered? Have you ever tried to wonder how all of these things came to happen? Right before my very eyes, I must say, I noticed lots of changes that happened. Even though I was very young, I saw how things unfolded right before my very eyes. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, I'm talking about how I saw movies, or how movies influenced romantic relationships, how I really saw that I watched it before my very eyes, how it really influenced a lot of things in romantic relationships. This is not to mean that industrialization did not play its part. This is not to mean that Christianity did not play its part and other external factors. Of course they did. But I want to focus more on how movies influenced romantic relationships. And I'm saying it because so that we as guys can really understand how these things happened right before our very eyes. Now, when you look very well, you ask yourself, what was it like before now? Or was there a time where women did dress, seductively in a European style? Because we can still argue that a typical African society still had women dressed in quite seductive ways. Nollywood movies still take us back to history, and they show us how women dress to go to stream. And when they dress to go to stream, they oftentimes put on wrappers. And these wrappers, oftentimes, they look very seductive. Yes. But, in terms of adopting European style fashion, we can all credit these ones to the advent of movies, the television, and also the internet. So, but before now, these things were not in existence. But now, here we are. It's the norm, right? And also, this concept of going out on a date, was it in existence before? I do not think I can ever remember hearing my dad ever telling me he took my mom out on a date, or my granddad, or our ancestors, right? Back then, courtship was mostly done probably under a tree. At best, they sat under a tree and laughed and played because their company was what was more important to each other. And the behaviors too, today now we see men kneeling down to propose to women. I think that wasn't the norm back then. And back then, I don't think men did kneel down to propose to women. This is more like an imported European type concept that we learned from movies. And this idea of opening doors for women, in fact, cars weren't even in existence back then, right? And even when cars were in existence, it wasn't actually the norm right here in Nigeria or in Africa. Even cooking meals, I think it was more like an abomination, or very close to it, to find men if are learning how to cook or things like that. Men were discouraged from participating in such activities. Poetic expressions, we can see people learned to write love letters back then, but not like it is today, to add up some other exciting and amusing ingredients to the way we actually approach ladies. It has improved now than before. And even in terms of making love, how we make love, sex and all of that. And the new redefinitions over time, the movies contributed. Back then, people used to hang out under trees, right? Women dressed more modest, I would say. At least when we look back at most of our photographs, we see that women wore things that covered even down to their knees and then even below their knees. But today it's different. So the movies did these things. And how did they do it? I don't know. We can say they did it subtly, because it happened unconsciously or subconsciously, I would say. It's not like they told us this is what we needed to do, but we watched these movies, and the more we consumed these movies, we began to adopt their lifestyle gradually. We still see it prevalent today, where now certain celebrities display certain lifestyles, the masses imitate it. And so this was how this whole thing happened. This is how it happened. And then our behaviors, before we know, we found men who watched lots of romantic movies began to kneel down and propose to women. And then we saw men opening doors for women. And then we saw men cooking meals for women. The concept of serving your woman breakfast in bed, began to pop up through the internet and the movies. We learned it subconsciously through these movies. And then our expressions also, we saw it right before our eyes. It all changed. It moved from writing letters and papers. Who still writes love letters and papers? Even though when you do it today, it may seem old-fashioned but quite romantic, but nobody does it again. It's no longer the norm. We find it old-fashioned, antiquated, and very archaic. So people don't do it again. We graduated, right? And we improved to something more. And here we are. For me, I'm saying the effect of this is that somehow, it messes things up for the average man, because dating or romantic relationship, it did not used to be as difficult as it is today. I mean, like I said, people did sit down under trees. And so under trees, it wouldn't cost much. Or at best, people could sit maybe in a palm wine joint and just eat a whole little thing and just eat something little, something they could afford. I mean, as time began to evolve over time. But today it's quite different, right? Now people have to take you out to an eatery, right? And so eateries cost lots of money, we know, right? Back then, it just didn't used to be like this, because when you look at one of the oldest eateries in Nigeria, it's Mr. Biggs, right? Mr. Biggs came, I think, 1973. So, meaning that 1973, not too many people could even afford to go there, because Mr. Biggs became very identified with the affluent people, the wealthy people. So dating was not really as expensive, or romantic relationships was not as expensive as it is today. Now, even down to the idea of love, making love, or making out, the movies even redefined it for us. Even though we may not say it, we may not say this is how we learned it, but maybe through pornos and even through romantic movies, we began to learn that the first thing you have to do was to kiss, then you have to go to the neck, and then the boss. It somehow, it kind of just give us a script on how to make love. And so we make love, and almost everybody make love in a scripted way. And when you choose to do it in a quite different way, most times some women or most people interpret to say you don't know how to make love, because we are falling for a particular prescription that the movies are sold to us subconsciously in a subtle way. We didn't know how these things happen. I mean, when you ask people, they cannot really tell that this is how we moved from beginning to imitate different styles like this. Even men themselves, they can't tell you this is how they began to adopt the movie-like gentleman character, knowing how to talk calmly, offer a woman your hand, open the doors, all of these things that are identified with being romantic. And so the definitions changed over time. And today, but I find the definitions quite very enslaving, overly demanding, and inconsiderate. Because when a man cannot afford to go on expensive dates, he is often not looked upon, right? Also, in the part of the movie thing, there's something that often amuses me when you look at movies. The movies often portray life to be very easy, and a lot of women have taken it for what it is, how they see it. Movies oftentimes are just 1 hour, 2 hours, but reality is a long time, a very, very long time that a lot of women fail to put into consideration. For example, the movies show how men go out of their way to please women, take them out on expensive dates, make it up to them, buy them expensive dresses, spoil them, and woo them in highly consumeric, expensive ways. And women tend to expect these things they watch in movies in reality, which is not usually possible. Now, the truth is that when you watch movies very well where men woo women, you discover that the movies barely show us where these men go out there to work and make money, to secure the money they use in spoiling and wooing these women. The movies do not show us these things. The only thing they show us is that the money is already there, and then the men are there to spend it, and which is what a lot of people don't put into consideration. So in reality, they forget that in reality, that is a very long time, which is not like it is in the movies. Men have to go out there to hustle, to try and make money. They put in all of their might, and then the money they often make is not even up to something that can afford them the luxury that they see in the movies. But yet these women still expect this particular one, and it's an impossible thing. It's an ideal that is very unrealistic, and it also has messed things up in a way. That's another thing I've also found and discovered also. Some men, on the poetic expressive side, some men are very confident to express themselves. But in that aspect of wooing women, it has now become more monetized and Europeanized in a fashion. In fact, another effect of it is that the movies also show to us their glamorous European weddings, especially the foreign movies, such that we even elevated the European traditional weddings over our African traditional weddings. And today, in fact, most females, I would say most females, because a lot of men don't care. Most females would even prefer to have a European white wedding over a traditional wedding. And so most times these things have become the norm, right? These things now have become the norm. And this is how I see, this is how I pictured it. Although true, industrialization contributed, and if we go down to the topic of industrialization, we'll still come back to the movies. For industrialization gave birth to machineries, and then inventions popped up, and yes, television came, and we had the phones, and yes, it's still all traced down to it. Feminism also in a way too, and a whole lot more other points, but I don't want to deviate from this particular point of saying this is how I pictured that the movies, influenced the dating system. So here we are today, and we have to live with the effect. I hope maybe we can, through this one, be able to picture the direction that it is heading to. Although I see little protests here and there, and lots of people are protesting and say they won't go with some of those old fashions. We have men saying they won't kneel to propose anymore. We have women saying they won't go through some of those other outdated fashions on which had been redefined over time. So we'll see how it unfolds. It's the amusing part of history, seeing how things happened and then still watching to see how they continue to unfold. So it's really interesting, and this is just me, my take. I imagine things a lot, I think things a lot, and this is where it led me to how movies influenced our romantic relationships over time. So I'll see you next time.